The House Democrats' campaign arm is officially ending its controversial ban, and a political consultant who worked with candidates challenging sitting Democratic incumbents in primaries, clinching a major victory for progressives. The representative Sean Patrick Maloney, who's a Democrat from New York, who's the newly installed chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, officially reversed the policy on Tuesday morning. He initially pledged to nix it during his campaign for the chair role and finalized it this week. Though it was in place for fewer than 2 years, although it was in place for fewer than 2 years, it still stymied some Democratic primary challengers and incensed the Democratic side, which celebrated its end. It's an enormous win, said Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's a Democrat from New York, said in a recent interview before Maloney's decision was formally announced, noting that the move would open a door for our party to leverage strength from all parts of it. The escalation and aggression against the progressives wing of the party with an explicit forward-facing backlist had created a list of dissuasion against candidates even considering grassroots organizing firms, she said. It was enacted in 2019, and the new policy had forbade the committee from contracting with or recommending to any House campaign a consultant or firm who worked the primary as sitting Democratic incumbent. It spurred an unexpectedly strong backlash, but was popular with members who are more prone to primary challenges and don't want their party apparatus to which they pay dues to enable their opponents. The ban had long been an informal practice at the DCCC, but codifying it sent progressives into a tailspin, coming just months after Ocasio-Cortez had filled a member of Democratic leadership in 2018. The groups that propelled her to Congress claimed it was an establishment attempt to blunt their movement. We have primaries to make sure we have the best and the brightest in every party, said Representative Marie Newman, who's a Democrat from Illinois, who successfully ousted a Democratic incumbent last year, even after the new policy forced several of her consultants to quit suddenly. So primaries should be unencumbered by outside forces. Maloney had reversed a policy treaty by his that was created by his predecessor. But Representative Sherry Bustos, who's a Democrat from Illinois, in a somewhat tacit acknowledgement that it had backfired, it created anonymity within the conference and a fierce clash with members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, including representatives like Mark Pocan, who's a Democrat from Wisconsin, and Pramila Jayapal, who's a Democrat from Washington. Who were then co-chairs. Ocasio-Cortez was a powerful force among the party's Democratic wing, was so outraged that she declined to pay any dues to the committee and instead donated directly to the candidates. The role was seen as an overture by Bustos to keep for the two key constituencies in the Democratic Party, but moderates who had helped win the majority and feared challenges from the Democrat side and the Congressional Black and Hispanic caucuses, which have both seen an influx in primary challengers in recent cycles. The CBC in particular made a show of banding together to block progressives from ousting one of their own. Representative Joyce Beatty, who's a Democrat from Ohio, had faced a challenger that was backed by a coalition of progressive groups, but Beatty had won. But now the former Representative Lacy Clay, who's a Democrat from Missouri, and a CBC member whose family has held his St. Louis district for years, lost to now Representative Cori Bush, who's a Black Lives Matter activist. But not everyone has lauded Maloney's decision. Basically, I think that's inappropriate to Democratic Representative Jim Costa, who's a member of the fiscally conservative Blue Dog Coalition from Central California. In an interview before the decision was finalized, Costa had easily beat the progressive challenger in 2020. We're supposed to be a team, he said in an interview last week, adding that members shouldn't help primary other members. It's the same principle as far as I'm concerned. We're either a team or we're not. Still, the DCCC remains a powerful gatekeeper, and it retains a significant amount of leverage. Even without an explicit rule in place, it could still choose to which vendors it doles out millions of dollars of TV and polling contracts for its independent expenditure arm, and it will have a larger role in steering top challenger campaign ads towards certain consultants and firms. But no one should be looking for work around here if they want to go after one of our members at the same time, Maloney told Politico last month. But I don't think that the blanket ban ever made sense, and we're going to replace it with a new approach. During her tenure, Bustos included a question on a forum for firms that wish to be on a DCCC-approved vendor list. Consultants had to attest that they understand the DCCC will not conduct business with or recommend to any of its targeted campaigns any consultant that works with an opponent of a sitting member of the House Democratic Caucus. The 2022 version of that form, which goes live Tuesday morning, will not include such a requirement. Yet contentious primaries might be unavoidable in the 2022 cycle, redistricting which will almost certainly place members in new territory and make them more vulnerable. The primary challenges and the amount of support that they receive or don't receive from top firms and strategists have been a thorny issue inside the caucus for years, but some successful challengers have won with the help of prominent Democratic pollsters or media consultants, including the Representative Seth Moulton, who's a Democrat from Massachusetts, who ousted incumbent John Tierney in 2014, and Representative Ayanna Pressley, who's a Democrat from Massachusetts, beat Mike Capuano in 2018. But part of the progressives' argument against the ban was that it led to less competition, and it deprived other candidates of more diversity and talent in the ecosystem of groups that work with campaigns. It ultimately, I think, works against especially newer vendors of color, people who might have just come up in more in the last decade in the business, and who might have been taking more diverse types of clients, Polkin said in a recent interview. It's good for the process to not have some arbitrary rule out there. The committee has been able to increase the amount it spends with diverse vendors, jumping from $4 million to 2016 and to $28.6 million in 2020, according to the DCCC data. A new policy for 2022 also requires approved vendors to attend the diversity, equity, and inclusion training offered by the committee. Despite this ban, Democrats had still notched the important victories. The 3 Democratic incumbents lost in primaries. 2 were long-term members who succeeded their fathers in Congress. Clay lost in Missouri, and Newman had failed Representative Dan Lipinski, who is a blue dog Democrat who opposed abortion rights and voted against Obamacare. A 3rd Representative, Eliot Engel, who's a Democrat from New York, the House of Foreign Affairs Committee chair, lost to the Representative Jamal Bowman, who's a middle school principal that's backed by progressives. Representative Henry Cellular, who's a Democrat from Texas, who's one of the most conservative Democrats in Congress and a vocal supporter of the blacklist, came within 3,000 votes of losing to Jessica Cisneros, who's a 26-year-old attorney that's backed by Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Bernie Sanders, who's an independent from Vermont. Some consultants embraced the so-called blacklist, even formed a website called the DCCblacklist.com to connect candidates with the firms who were not afraid to pull out the DCCC rules. There just aren't a lot of people who want to do Democratic consulting that hold the views of Bill Clinton and Bruce Reed anymore, said Sean McElwee, who's a co-founder of the Data for Progressives. A liberal polling, it's a Democratic polling outfit actually, but Reed is a former chair of the centrist Democratic Leadership Council and currently serves as a White House aide to President Joe Biden. McElwee's firm had polled in Bush's race in Missouri and for Bowman in New York, but said that the Data for Progress lost to Clinton in Texas. But Julie Oliver, who was running against the GOP, Representative Roger Williams, thanks to the committee's new policy. The group had polled for Oliver in June before being replaced by a DCCC-approved vendor. Treating progressives like they're something that must be crushed, he said, is rather than partners who want to build a better party that is most durable and is not a healthy tactic.